It was the kind of job offer that didn't make sense. A voicemail left at 2:13 a.m. from a number I didn't recognize. "Hello, Mr. Rayburn. We reviewed your application. The position is yours, if you're still interested. Please arrive tonight at 11:30 p.m. Use the side entrance. Do not knock. The door will open for you." I hadn't applied for any jobs, not in months. My resume had long been forgotten on old job boards, and I'd given up hope after my third interview ended with a handshake and radio silence. But I had just $42 to my name, no power in the apartment, and rent already overdue. Desperation is a powerful motivator. And curiosity? That's even worse. I called the number back. It rang once, then disconnected. And so, at 11:18 p.m., on a cold Thursday night, I stood at the crumbling side entrance of Hensley and Sons Mortuary, squinting at a faded placard half swallowed by ivy. I didn't knock. The door clicked and creaked open on its own. The mortuary's interior was colder than outside, like it exhaled winter. Fluorescent lights buzzed dully overhead. The hallway smelled faintly of formaldehyde and roses. No one greeted me. There was no front desk, no welcome packet, just a folded note on a wooden table near the stairwell. "Mr. Rayburn, you've been hired as our overnight custodial attendant. The work is simple. Remain on site from midnight to 6 a.m. Keep the floors clean. Keep the lights on. Do not enter room 3B. You will be paid weekly in cash. No questions, no paperwork." Beneath it was a ring of old-fashioned keys labeled with tiny brass tags. There was no job description, no contract, no supervisor. I should have walked out right then, but I pocketed the keys. Because part of me, the same part that believed in luck and signs and second chances, told me this was what I had been waiting for. By midnight, I was alone in a building full of the dead. The mortuary was larger than it looked from the outside. Narrow hallways split into wings that felt more like a hospital than a funeral home. I mopped quietly, the floor tiles slick with something I didn't dare examine under the pale lights. Every clock in the building ticked differently. Some were fast, others lagged behind. I passed at least 2 clocks that were stuck at 3:33. And every so often, I heard a sound like breathing. Not from me. Not from any room I could see. I chalked it up to old Vince. But I started humming as I worked, just so I could drown out the whispers I knew weren't there. At 2:08 a.m., the lights in the east hallway flickered. One by one, they died, until I stood staring down a long corridor with nothing but darkness at the far end. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Wet. Dragging. Coming from behind the door marked 3B. The one I wasn't supposed to open. My mind reeled. I hadn't gone near that room. I hadn't touched it. But someone, or something, was inside. I should have left. Called the police. At least checked the door. Instead, I backed away. I returned to the janitor closet, locked myself inside, and waited. When I emerged at 6:01 a.m., the lights were back on. Room 3B's door was shut. No footprints. No sounds. But a new note waited for me on the desk. "Good work. Same time tomorrow. Your payment is in the envelope." Inside was $300 in cash. And beneath it, a small yellowing photo. A black and white portrait of a man who looked just like me. But the date written on the back said 1976. And the ink was still wet. I didn't sleep that day. I sat in my apartment with the curtains drawn tight, the photograph on my kitchen table, and the envelope of cash untouched beside it. The man in the photo wore a crisp suit. His hands were folded. And the background behind him, it wasn't any ordinary backdrop. It was unmistakably the east hallway of Hensley and Sons Mortuary. The same hallway where the lights had gone out. Same checker tile floor. Same floral wallpaper. I flipped the photo again. That was almost 50 years ago. And yet, he looked exactly like me. I showed the photo to my upstairs neighbor, Mrs. Kinsey, a retired librarian who loved puzzles and conspiracy shows. I didn't tell her where it came from, only that I found it in an old book. She adjusted her glasses and peered at it. "This looks like a gelatin silver print. Definitely 20th century. But that gloss finish weird. Feels too fresh." She handed it back. "Whoever printed this wanted it to look old. Or maybe it is old. Either way, spooky. Where'd you say you got it?" I lied again. "Garage sale." She smirked. "That's where the cursed stuff always shows up." By 10:45 p.m., I was already walking back to the funeral home. The street was empty, and Hensley and Son stood under a halo of sickly yellow light. It looked less like a building and more like something that wore a building's skin. At exactly 11:30, the door opened by itself again. The same folded note waited on the table. "Welcome back. Clean the West Wing tonight. Do not enter the embalming room. Do not answer any knocks." Underneath the note was a new key, tagged ER, embalming room. Why give me the key to a room I'm not supposed to enter? Tonight, I worked slower. The West Wing was newer, with polished floors and glass walls that reflected more than they should have. I saw shapes behind me that weren't mine, shadows moving just a half beat behind my reflection. I turned corners expecting someone to be there. No one was. But the whispers returned. Faint. Familiar. They didn't say words. Just breathed, like they were trying to remember how. And then came the knocking. It started faintly. Soft taps. Knock. 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 From somewhere deep down the main hallway. I froze mid-mop. Then, again. Knock. 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 Rhythmic. Slow. Coming closer. I leaned against the wall, holding my breath, listening as the sound passed room 3B, past the supply closet, and then stopped just beyond the door to the embalming room. I shouldn't have moved, but I walked toward it. The door looked ordinary, thick, brown, slightly warped with age. I placed my hand on it. Something knocked back. 3 loud thuds that rattled the frame. I stepped back, heart racing. The knocking stopped. But then, someone whispered my name. Eli. That was my name. No one here knew my name. No one should have. I ran. I dropped the mop and bolted for the supply room. Locked the door. Turned off the light. And I waited. Waited through the hours as shadows danced beneath the doorframe, and the air pressed heavier with each breath. When the building fell quiet again, I emerged at dawn. The mop was back in the closet. The hallway was spotless. But I hadn't cleaned it. And once again, another envelope waited on the table. Another $300. And another photo. This one was of me, standing in the very supply closet I had just hidden in. Only the photo showed my eyes completely blacked out, and someone else's hand on my shoulder. A hand that hadn't been there. I stopped opening the envelopes. I still took the money. I still showed up. But I no longer looked inside the folded notes. I tossed them into the fireplace the moment I got home, because I already knew what they'd say. Don't enter room 3B. Don't answer the knocking. Don't look behind you. And yet, every night, something changed. The hallways grew longer. Doors appeared where there were none before. And the mortuary began to recognize me. On my 4th night, I brought a flashlight and a notebook. If I was going to lose my mind, I wanted a paper trail. I mapped the building. Each room, each hallway, every camera, even the drafty vents near the ceiling. I was careful, methodical. But by 2:30 a.m., I noticed something impossible. The supply closet moved. On my map, I marked it just left of the break room. But when I walked back down that hallway, it was gone. And in its place was a black door labeled Archives. That room had never been there before. And it wasn't on any fire escape map either. The archives door was unlocked. Dust coated the handle. I opened it. The air that greeted me was dry and stale, like a room sealed for decades. Dozens of filing cabinets lined the walls, stacked 6 high, most rusted shut. A lone desk sat in the center, facing an old box TV playing static. But what truly stopped me was the wall of photos. Hundreds of them. All Polaroids. All tacked to a corkboard that stretched ceiling to floor. And every photo had the same subject. Me. But not me now. Some showed me in clothes I've never owned. Standing in rooms I've never been in. Smiling next to people I've never met. In one, I was a child, holding the same mop I used tonight. In another, I was wearing a mortician's coat, face pale and sunken like I hadn't slept in weeks. And some photos showed me dead. I flipped one of the Polaroids over. A handwritten label. E. Rayburn, Cycle 14, 1983. Another. E. Rayburn, Cycle 22, 1998. And the most recent, Cycle 30, 2023. Cycle? Were these versions of me? Or people who just looked like me? I scanned the room again, panic rising like bile. The file cabinets. The TV. The static. The air that felt like it remembered me before I existed. I ran. But the door was gone. I turned back to the hallway and saw only drywall. Like the room had folded back into the building itself. At 5:59 a.m., I heard the chime. A grandfather clock in the main chapel struck 6. And when I turned, the door was there again. But the note waiting on the desk had no envelope. Just a single sentence. You are now part of the building. The cash was there, yes, but also a contract. Signed by E. Rayburn. The ink was still wet. I hadn't signed it, but the signature matched mine. I skipped the next night. First time I didn't show up. I turned my phone off, unplugged the battery from my doorbell camera, and tried to forget the past 5 days. At 11:30 p.m., there was a knock on my door. Not my apartment door. My bedroom door. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. When I opened it, no one was there. But down the hall, past the kitchen, my front door was open. The keys from the mortuary were sitting neatly on the floor, and hanging from the chain was a new tag. Welcome home. I moved. Left the apartment that weekend. Didn't pack much, just what I could fit in a backpack. No forwarding address. No goodbye texts. I paid the first month's rent on a cabin 2 towns over, deep in the woods near Blakesville, no neighbors for miles. I thought I could outrun it. That the funeral home was some kind of cursed building and all I had to do was not go back. But it wasn't the building that followed me. It was the job. The first night in the cabin, I made sure there were no mirrors. Taped the windows shut. Left the lights on. Still, at 11:30 p.m., I heard the front door unlock. Not open. Just unlock. Click. I walked slowly to the door. My hands were shaking. No wind. No footsteps outside. Just silence. But there on the welcome mat was a new envelope. Inside was one of the funeral home keys. The tag read, Archives, Mobile Entry. And beneath it a photo. Of the cabin. Of me. Inside, asleep in the armchair. The photo was taken from inside the cabin. The next morning, I drove back to town. I went to Hensley & Sons during daylight, something I hadn't dared try before. It looked abandoned. The door was bolted shut, and the front windows were covered in dust thick enough to write in. A sign hung on the door. Closed for renovation. Reopening soon. I walked around the side. The ivy was gone. The wall was clean. No door. No knob. No entry. The side entrance didn't exist. But I had used it 4 nights in a row. I circled back. Across the street, a small florist was open. I walked in, pretending to browse, then asked casually, How long has the funeral home been closed? The woman behind the counter blinked. Hensley's? That place shut down in '07. I lost time after that. Days blurred. I slept less and less. When I did, I dreamt of long hallways and rows of filing cabinets whispering in my voice. And I woke up with photographs in my hands. Each one older. Each one closer to something. On the 7th night, I gave in. I returned to the cabin, turned off all the lights, and sat by the door. At 11:30 p.m. sharp, the knock came. Knock. 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 But this time, it wasn't the door that opened. It was the floor. A panel beneath the rug creaked upward, revealing a narrow staircase leading down, stone steps, slick and worn. And I descended, because I already knew where it would lead. The staircase opened into the same archive room I'd found before. Same wall of photos. Same buzzing TV. But now, the corkboard was empty. All the photos gone. In their place, a single mirror. No frame. Just a perfectly polished square of glass set into the wall. And in that reflection, I saw myself. But not me as I was. The reflection wore the mortician's suit. Its skin was pale. Its lips were sewn shut. It raised its hand and wrote something across the glass with a fingertip dripping dark ink. Cycle 31 begins now. Then it smiled. Only I hadn't. I tried to smash the mirror. I threw a chair, a book, my flashlight. Nothing left a mark. And then behind me, footsteps. Dozens of them. I turned and saw silhouettes walking toward me through the open filing cabinets. Each one, a version of me. Older, younger, uniformed, disfigured. All silent. All watching. They began to hum. Low and resonant. And in that moment, I understood. I wasn't working at the funeral home. I was becoming part of it. A role. A face. A cycle. Each version of me had tried to escape. To reset. But every time, the funeral home reached farther. Bent space, memory, even time. This wasn't a job. It was a loop. I woke up in the mortuary supply closet. Dressed in the mortician's coat. My name embroidered on the chest. E. Rayburn, custodian 3rd class. And on the table outside, waiting for me as always. A folded note. Welcome to your first night. Your duties are simple. Mop the floors. Keep the lights on. Do not enter room 3B. I didn't remember coming back. But it didn't matter. Because I had a feeling. Tomorrow, the rules would change again. There's a hallway in the funeral home that doesn't obey the laws of space. You walk through it and forget your name. Turn a corner and lose 3 hours. Clocks won't work there. Flashlights die. Your reflection watches from the wrong side of the glass. That hallway leads to room 3B. And tonight, the note told me to go inside. Mr. Rayburn, access is now granted. Room 3B will open at 3:03 a.m. Remain calm. Do not speak to it. It already knows your voice. No more warnings. No more rules. Just inevitability. I mopped the floors for the first 2 hours, because that's what the others had done. Maybe following the ritual delays whatever's waiting at the end. Maybe it doesn't. But it made me feel like I still had control. At 2:59, the funeral home fell silent. No buzzing. No lights. No clocks ticking. And then I heard the door unlatch. Room 3B was colder than any place I've ever been. No light switch. Just a single candle burning in the far corner. The room was entirely empty. No gurneys. No equipment. No windows. Just a chair in the center of the room. And someone sitting in it. I thought it was me again. But when the figure looked up, I saw its face. It wasn't mine. Not exactly. It had my features, yes. But aged. Unnatural. Skin stretched wrong over the bone. Eyes missing. Mouth stitched. And around its neck, a lanyard. My old name badge. E. Rayburn, Cycle 1. It held out its hand, palm up. Something was resting in it. A pocket watch. Still ticking. But when I took it, the ticking stopped. The figure smiled, or tried to, and pointed behind me. I turned. The room had changed. Where there was once candlelight, now stood hundreds of chairs, filling an auditorium that hadn't been there a moment ago. And in every chair sat a version of me. Young, old, dying, dead. Some stared blankly. Some wept. Some were wrapped in plastic, stitched at the jaw, dressed for display. A single voice spoke from nowhere and everywhere. Only one may leave. I stepped backward, clutching the watch, feeling it pulse faintly in my hand like a second heart. A door opened to my right. Blinding daylight poured in. A way out. But none of the others moved. They couldn't. Their cycle had ended. I understood now. This place didn't want workers. It needed witnesses. People it could bind to itself through repetition, memory, identity. The funeral home was a ritual, and each of us, a line in its chant. The figure in the chair began to hum. That same low, bone-deep hum I'd heard in the archives. And with it, the others joined in. The walls began to shake. Lights buzzed back to life. Blood ran from the cracks in the floor like ink from an overfilled pen. And I ran. I ran through the hallway that bent. Through the chapel. Through the front door that had never opened before. Into the sunlight. Into silence. That was 3 months ago. I don't know why I was allowed to leave. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stayed in the chair. But every night, at 11:30 p.m., I feel something knock on my front door. I don't answer. I don't sleep. I keep the pocket watch with me. It hasn't ticked since I left. But sometimes, just before midnight, it moves. Once. Just once. Like it's winding itself back. And I know what that means. Cycle 32 is coming. But I won't go back. Not again. Not even if they offer me double. Not even if they promise it's my last shift. Because here's the truth I learned too late. You don't take a job at Hensley & Sons. It takes you.